Yeah.
Welcome to the place where the truth comes first. Breaking down the headlines, separating facts from the worst. No fear, no bias, no agenda to hide. Just real conversations from the other side. Hollywood lights, street stories, what's really going on? We ask the tough questions long after the hype is gone. Different perspectives, every voice is a shot. Because real discussion is something this world forgot.
Hey, what's going on, Hollywood besties? This is Alan Thompson with More Based Off. At what point does helping somebody stop being helped? That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. At what point does helping somebody stop being helped and start becoming just content? Because that's the question I keep coming back to when I look at Quita, Fiesty, and Polo. So we're going to focus on kind of like the main stars of Atlanta street interviews, right? Those have been the main stars for the past couple of years or so. And really, this entire Atlanta street interviews universe we've been watching, they've been kind of the main ones that kind of been, I guess you could say, the constants, so to speak, on the channel. So from the beginning, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying every person who puts on, who Marcus has put on camera, and is who's somebody that's struggling is automatically somebody that he's exploiting. I do believe that sometimes a camera could absolutely change somebody's life. I mean, think about it. It can introduce them to an audience. It can bring donations. It can connect them with resources. It can give somebody a voice who otherwise wouldn't have one, right? But here's where I think it can get kind of tricky. What happens when the person's struggle becomes more valuable to the content than their actual recovery? Because if somebody getting better means the story gets less interesting, we need to kind of talk about that, I think, right? So starting with Quita, for instance, let's start with Quita. We watched Quita become, like the new star of the channel. Quita came along after, pretty much we knew Josiah wasn't coming back. We really didn't have anybody on the channel that was really that, I guess you could say exciting, so to speak. And Quita came along, fresh out of prison, literally didn't even know really what YouTube was, and Marcus just kind of introduced her to this whole new world. He put her onto YouTube, he put her on the OnlyFans, as we know, that MP site, which is her latest reason that she ended up in jail. But that's why I think Quita kind of represents one of the biggest questions surrounding this type of content. What's the end goal? Because when you think about it, documenting somebody's situation is one thing, but then helping them actually move beyond that situation is something completely different. If somebody is vulnerable enough that their life becomes compelling content, what happens when the cameras turn off? What resources are being put in place? What does stability look like? And most importantly, are we watching progress or are we watching another episode? Right? His content started to become like we're watching episodes, because there is a difference. And I'm not putting all the responsibility on Marcus when it comes to that. Adults do ultimately have control over their own lives. I do believe that. But once you're making money off of it, you're building an audience and you're generating views around somebody's struggles, I think it is a fair thing to ask, is the relationship mutually beneficial? Okay, so that's Quita. So now Feisty. Let's talk about her. I think Feisty is perhaps the clearest example of how complicated things can become. I mean, she's a complicated person. People didn't just watch her. People became invested in Feisty, and they're still very invested in Feisty. They wanted to see her house. They wanted to see her safe. They wanted to see her doing better. And then when her circumstances changed and she ended up leaving Atlanta, headed to Texas, suddenly everybody had an opinion about whether that was actually a better situation, including myself, clearly, because, we've already done videos about that. We've talked about it extensively. And take Nick out of it for a second, because really, like I told you all before, I am not even trying to talk about him anymore, and take Marcus out of it. Take everybody else out of it. And the bigger question is, why did thousands of strangers become so emotionally invested in where this woman sleeps at night? It's because I think her vulnerability became part of the entertainment. And that's uncomfortable to say because viewers can genuinely care about somebody while simultaneously being entertained by their problems. And I think that's kind of like explains a lot of it. It's like, yeah, we do genuinely care about these people, but at the same time, yeah, we kind of entertained by the problems that are presented when we see them on our screens. So I do think both things can be true. It's like we root for Feisty and still click the video when there's drama. We want her to succeed and still wonder what happened now. That's the uncomfortable relationship between vulnerability and social media. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Polo. Polo is different, I think because Polo brings, personality. He's funny, he's unpredictable. Polo is gets all the women. He, of course, can be entertaining. But we've also witnessed moments, that wasn't Polo. We saw him some down moments where he's struggling. Of course, the struggles with his drinking, um, and things like that, and even moments where, possibly he's been abusive towards certain women he's been with. We've seen emotional moments, disagreements with Marcus, when he goes off on Marcus. Um, and then, of course, the latest one, the bag situation. And again, all of these things become a storyline. So again, the question is, where's the is the line? Because if somebody's intoxicated, emotional, angry, embarrassed, or otherwise having a vulnerable moment, is that automatically something the internet needs to simply see because the camera happened to be rolling? And I'm not even saying Polo doesn't want to be filmed. That's not really the point. The question is whether having somebody's permission automatically makes every piece of content right or ethical. You know, I think those are two different questions. And I think that is a lot of what we have started to begin to see with Marcus. It's like, you know, even if, say, you have these people's permission to do it, is every instance the right instance to just record these people in certain situations? And yeah, we play a role too. Here's where I have to turn the camera around a little bit because we can't put all of this just on Marcus. And look, I'm not defending, how we go in on Marcus and what he does wrong. I mean, we do watch it, and where we have watched it. A lot of you guys don't watch it anymore. Um, so the algorithm, doesn't lie. Because people clicked, they commented, they argued, they donated, and people waited for the next episode. And I mean, in a sense, a lot of people are still doing the same things. Um, so that's why I include myself in this conversation because I am a commentary channel. I'm discussing content that already exists publicly, but I still have to ask myself what I'm contributing when I cover these stories. So I do always try to cover the stories from a certain angle to realize that I have to be contributing something too, as well, with the type of commentary I put out. So it's like, am I analyzing what's happening, and am I bringing another perspective, or am I just feeding the same crazy machine I'm criticizing? I do think about all of these things before I make my videos. I think anybody making commentary around vulnerable people should, occasionally ask themselves those questions, including myself. Um, so how do you tell the difference between really helping somebody and exploiting them? I think one of the biggest indicators would be, does the person benefit when the camera is off? If the views disappear tomorrow, would the relationship still exist? If the story stopped generating money, would somebody still answer their phone call? If they became completely stable, house, working, healthy, boring, drama free, that's if Feisty became that way, would everybody involved actually celebrate that? Or would the content suddenly have a problem because there's nothing left to film? So I think that's the real test, because real help should eventually make the helper less necessary. If somebody's situation has to maintain chaotic for the content to continue working, then we're no longer just talking about documenting someone's life. We're talking about this kind of like, I guess you could say, ecosystem that can potentially benefit from them remaining vulnerable. And, I think in that case, that does deserve some criticizing. So that's why I kind of wanted to make this video, not because I have some definitive answer about Quita, Feisty, or Polo. I don't know everything happening off the camera. Neither does anybody watching from home. But I do think we've seen enough, to kind of have a larger conversation. Because, of course, this is bigger than Atlanta Street interviews. Because as we know, we don't even know the future of Atlanta Street interviews. This is happening on more than just Atlanta Street interviews. It happens from other content creators and other types of content as well. You know, um, who's the person ultimately benefiting the most in content like this? Is it the person whose story we're watching, the person holding the camera, or us, the audience waiting to see what happens next? I think that's the conversation we might want to have. So tell me what you think. Drop it in the comments below. Where is the line between documenting somebody's story and exploiting their vulnerability? And when it comes to Quita, Feisty, and Polo, do you believe being featured in this content has ultimately helped them more, or has it hurt them? Let's talk about it in the comments. Like, comment, share, subscribe, turn on those notifications. Alan Thompson, more based off. Catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching More Based Off. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, subscribe, comment, and share this video with someone who would enjoy it too. Your support helps to grow the channel. If you'd like to support the channel even further, my Cash App is on the screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.